referring the legal system. Sorry? Oh, difficulties. Yeah, okay. Difficulties encountered in the system. One thing, the only thing that I think is fundamental for consideration as far as the Nigerian state is concerned, is we have not attained a point whereby we strike a balance between the public interest and individual interest. Here we are, for example, for the purpose of the election coming up in a few days, confronted on a daily basis with hate speeches that have the capacity to now set the country ablaze. Someone will simply sit in the comfort of his room, a kind of sending fake messages, even when he knows, in fact and in law, in all sincerity, it was false and fraudulent, thereby promoting a personal interest to the detriment of a public interest. So the major regret is realizing that most Nigerians do not understand the art of striking a balance between the public interest and the public interest. Public interest, you have no reason whatsoever to subject the life of over 200 million Nigerians to unnecessary trouble on account of your act, all out of killing for freedom of expression. And then when you talk, someone will now say, I am faced with a question on rule of law, that an order is made by a court and then you are not obeying it. Do you now, for goodness sake, promote, support, and establish a right of an individual that is setting the life of over 200 million in danger out of purported respect for freedom of expression? So the major regret, if any, is the fact that people tend to promote individual interest as against the public interest. And until we now come to realize that there are limits to what you can do as an individual, regardless of what claim of right you have, which will eventually affect the collective interest of over 200 million people, until we come to realize that the interest of 200 million Nigerians prevails over the purported freedom of movement, liberty, and expression of an individual, it is going to be a very difficult process and exercise for us. So if there are perhaps maybe challenges or indeed difficulties associated with it, it's a situation whereby, for example, now when we are talking of Naira redesign, for that matter, simply because I have succeeded in raising, perhaps legitimately or otherwise, 200 billion, I can now come out to fight a system that is battling to address transparency, to address visibility of the process out of desire to limit corruption. Is it the limitation of corruption that will now translate to having funds at our disposal arising from the transparency and visibility of the system that can be used in the infrastructural development for the benefit of 200 Nigerians that matters? Or perhaps submitting to the demand of an individual that perhaps illegitimately, unlawfully, fraudulently, deceitfully, perhaps acquired 200 billion, and then he now set aside 100 billion because he has greater noise-making capacity of compromising the press to start blowing rule of law that we will now submit to the interests of an individual over and above the national interest that will now support us in ensuring deepening democracy, in ensuring having in place a corrupt-free society, in ensuring having in place resources that can now translate into infrastructure. So it is about people, limited number for that matter, that have succeeded in having at their disposal resources that they are protecting. And then again, forcing a compromise on a policy that is beneficial to 200 million Nigerians. Our interest is not to a fraction but to a whole. And the whole is the Nigerian population of over 200 million and not limited number of individuals that feel a policy should not stand simply because it does not accord with their desires and with what they expect to see operating in the system. So that is my take on that. And then the financial autonomy, why is it difficult to achieve? The compromise, I have just raised an issue of an individual forcing his way over the majority on account of the resources at his disposal. So it is about, when you talk of autonomy and you talk of finances, it is all about the finances. The answer is in the question. You talk of the financial, you talk of autonomy. Then here are people that believe in one way or the other, their finances are going to be compromised, or the volume of finances at their disposal is going to be limited, and they fight it. So that is the issue. But the true position of things is it is difficult because the compromise, because of the fact they will end up having the volume of the finances and funds available at their disposal compromised. But then ours is to ensure things are done, and then arising therefrom, we took steps to effect constitutional amendment to Section 123 of the Constitution to ensure the autonomy of the legislature, the autonomy of the judiciary, and we further supported it with an Executive Order number 10. And we are doing, I will continue to do, to ensure at the end of the day that the system works efficiently, and indeed, the system works efficiently. We will continue to do it. We will continue to push by way of legislative framework, by way of executive intervention, by way of political interventions, among others. Which one is the next one? Breach of court orders. Well, corruption and in the system, I do not think corruption indeed is exclusive to the judiciary. It's all encompassing, all pervading in the system. But the true position of things is, without being exclusive and restrictive in consideration, what we are doing in terms of the fight against corruption is all encompassing. Both in terms of institutional interventions, you have institutions like EFCC, ICPC, the police are there, and Code of Conduct. They are all there by way of institutional intervention to ensure that corruption is reduced to the barest minimum. Again, in terms of actions and enforcement, we are taking steps to prosecute, and that prosecution has been ongoing to such an extent that as at the time the EFCC was established, I think around 2003, or up to around 2015, they had at to their credit, a record of conviction of around 106 convictions. But only this year, I'm talking of 2022, they have over 3,000 convictions. So that, in essence, established a point that we are making progress. We are recording successes as far as the fight against corruption is concerned. But that has further been consolidated the more by the international recommendation and commendation accorded our president upon, on account of his appointment as the champion of anti-corruption by the African Union. And that was further reconsolidated by international bodies, inclusive of United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, which equally assessed Nigerian corruption index and come to the terms with the reality that among the 17 establishments and institutions assessed in terms of corruption, 17, there has been a tremendous percentage of success and enhancement in the success associated with the fight against corruption in respect of 15. So regardless of the dimension and the way and manner you look at it, we are making and recording huge successes. And that can further be visibly seen arising from what we have been doing in terms of recovery of illicit funds. We have a record, first, of recovering over 200 $322 million in 2017, which set the foundation of what we are witnessing today as the effort of the president in taking people out of poverty by the establishment of the social intervention programs. So the $322 million were applied in frontal attack of poverty and ensuring the support for employment in the system. We equally recorded further success as far as the fight against corruption is concerned by way of deploying additional $311 million recovered, recovered and repatriated on infrastructure, which funds were indeed applied in the completion of the second Niger Bridge, progressing with the work on Abuja-Kano Expressway and Lagos-Ibadan, among others. So regardless, and then if you are talking of prevention, I have demonstrated to you how the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act came into place, what we have done relating to incidental legislations that were put in place, proceeds of crime bill, and a lot of other legislations. So regardless of the way and manner you look at it, we are doing the needful in terms of the fight against corruption, not only within the judiciary, but in fact within the system at large, by way of having institutions associated with the fight against corruption and supporting them to perform, by way of having the necessary and relevant legislations, by way of indeed having in place policies that have translated into enforcement and prevention of corruption, among others. So that is my take on it. And more so, we equally come to realize the fact that as far as the judiciary, if you want to take it in exclusivity is concerned, there is need to ensure that someone is adequately equipped for the purpose of performing. You give someone and expect much from him. So with that in mind, we equally have taken steps to ensure that the welfare of the judiciary is enhanced, and then Mr. President has given approval in principle for the enhancement of the welfare. And again, a further process associated with the transparency and integrity of the system is being deployed in terms of recruitment of judges to such an extent that agencies of government, including the anti-corruption agencies, are involved in filtering and clearing officers aspiring and vying to be judicial officers. So a lot of policy decisions were generally broadly brought to bear in terms of the fight against corruption, generally, and then exclusively as far as the judiciary is concerned. So we are doing what it takes in terms of ensuring the integrity, quality, and the efficiency of the system generally, with particular regard to the scourge associated with corruption.